Hey, caramba, it's cold in here. Anybody, what's happened to this thermostat? What is it? What temperature is it where you are? What governs what temperature is where you are? There, if I get it's so cold, my mouth's not working. Let's talk about that today, shall we? Welcome to this Friday edition of Two Chaps, Many Cultures, episode 110.
Welcome, everybody, and I'm glad your daughter lets you. I'm suspecting it's your daughter's. Yes. What are these called? Earmuffs?
That's a very big presumption, sir.
It is, yes. In fact, it's your clown costume, and you're moonlighting as a circus clown, right? Welcome, everybody. This is Two Chaps, Many Cultures on this Friday, episode 110. This is the show about culture as a business, and the business of culture, where your input is very welcome, and where we want to know where in the world you're joining us from, so we can give you a shout out, give us a comment via whatever chat box you're using on your device. You might watch us on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Facebook. There's ways for you to comment and liking us or applauding or hearting or whatever it is you do. Let us know where in the world you are so we can give you a shout out and maybe pull up some of your comments as you continue watching. Friday, and it's cold outside, or is it? I don't know. Is it cold inside, Brett?
No, it's not cool here. I would call it rather comfortable for me. Of course, there's no bad weather. There's only bad clothing, and even if it was cold, I've got plenty of equipments to be able to keep me warm, as you so observed, right?
Yeah, it's very, very becoming. So comfortable temperature, that is a quite subjective measure, is it not? So yeah. When do we consider it to be just right? Is there something maybe that could be a trend, a cultural trend in terms of how we make our indoor spaces comfortable?
Yeah, I think that it falls under, in many ways, when I work with clients, we talk about the concept of some of these cultural dimensions and the aspect of the two different, I guess they are different. Either you are someone that comes from a nature controls mentality where you just deal with what you've got to deal with. Okay, so you are part of the surroundings. You make your peace with it. You interact with it. You leverage it to your advantage. The other side of it is that, and obviously this is in more affluent type of cultures. There is a sense that we can control nature. We actually have some control about setting the temperature around us and things like this. And I often say to people, Starbucks is one of those ubiquitous places on the planet that we can see in a lot of places of the world. Now, we may not go there for the coffee. I drink tea, by the way. But at least it is kind of a consistent place. That's really what Starbucks is. But I do say to people, I know that in the US at least, if I'm going to be sitting, say it's the middle of summer, if I'm going to be sitting in a Starbucks for more than 30 minutes to do any work, I need to take something to keep myself warm, because you know that temperature will be cranked down to make sure it's nice and cool inside. But, I get cold.
Maybe that's a business tactic, right? If you're cold, then they want you to buy another hot beverage. However, I think, and the reason why we're talking about this is I came across an article not too long ago, and the headline sucked me in. It was like, why do we keep it at 72 degrees Fahrenheit across America all the time, or something like that? And I was like, do we really? And then the article goes on to question, no, we don't. And this was a blog, obviously written with some commercial intent behind it. The person who wrote it works for I think for a interior design company and managing office spaces. And sure, it was a good way to trigger my interest. Not that I'm in the market right now to have the two Chaps towers be redesigned internally. We just finished it this way, right? But it brought to my attention something that I've been noticing throughout my professional life as I was traveling and working abroad, that the way we air condition or not, or how we maintain temperature or climate, so to say. That's why we call it climate control. How we manage climate in indoor spaces or sometimes even outdoor spaces, that is different in different parts of the world. And coming to the United States or to North America from Europe, I found it at first quite difficult to adjust to the cold, even in the summer. And I found to have more sniffy noses during the summer months than during the winter time because of the temperature change between indoor and outdoor space. So as you go into most commercial or professional indoor spaces in the US, you will be greeted by air-conditioned environments. And the hotter it is outside, the bigger the temperature gap between inside and outside. And to me, this was flabbergasting because I wondered what the purpose might be and how they justify the expense of keeping it that cold. There's a lot of energy that goes into that. So I come from from a culture that is less indulgent. If we're going by the good old Hofstede dimensions, I come from a culture that is more restrained in how much we allow to reward ourselves or make our lives more comfortable. And I found it a little bit extravagant to have this type of climate control, nature control that comes at a fairly high expense. How are you seeing that, Brett?
Yeah, no, I didn't grow up with air conditioning. Pretty much, I don't remember having air conditioning until I was probably later in. Maybe I can't remember the exact time, but I mean, just early in my life, air conditioning was something that was a luxury. It was something that you turned on, and the cost of it was always taken into account. And it wasn't really an environmental thing back then. Now it's probably more of an environmental aspect of it. But I think those cultures that really, and it embedded the psyche of the cultures. And in Australia, that the land was inhospitable. It's something that we needed to kind of make our peace with. It's the home of the oldest continuing civilization on the face of the planet in the Australian Aborigines, and for 40 to 60,000 years, they did it okay, and they managed and they interacted with the land. They took care of the land. Yeah. So I don't think that was really the intention. Of course, now we have central heating and air conditioning in most places in Australia, but in Europe, where there's still that aspect that US Americans are surprised when they go and live in a country in Europe, and our home in Poland doesn't have air conditioning still. So it is one of those things where it's like, if you go there with the expectation that it's going to be, you're going to just recreate what you've recreated here, then, you probably have to do some homework and just assess that. And how are you going to respond to that in the day? Like other places like Japan, where it's kind of a formal part of doing business. If, at a certain, pretty even low on the management scale, that you wear a suit and tie. But now you're in an office that is really maintained at about 80 degrees Fahrenheit, or somewhere around the mid 20s, and that makes it uncomfortable. People notice that after a while. Yeah.
I think in Japan they had a government initiative not too long ago, in the hot summer months, to not air condition the office spaces as much. But if you're in a buttoned-up culture like in Japan, where you're expected to wear a suit or tie or formal wear to work, that makes it quite uncomfortable to be in indoor spaces where you might sweat a lot. So I think they released or relax the dress code a little in corporate Japan in order to accommodate for the higher indoor temperatures, and the goal being reducing the CO2 emissions footprint of an entire country, right? Because the less we burn energy, or the less we generate energy in order to keep indoor spaces cool, the less CO2 we emit as an economy. And that is something I think where the old dimensional comparisons can work as an explanation, right? How much indulgence do we have as a society? How much do we allow ourselves to be very comfortable? How much do we reward ourselves for whatever reason? And how much long-term planning versus short-term reward do we follow, right? So I think Anglo-American or Anglo-Saxon culture is fairly short-term or quite short-term motivated. So I want it cold now, so let me turn the dial on the AC and get it to 68 because 71 is too warm for me. I can't stand to work in 71 any longer. It's got to be 68. And the fan goes on, and so does the AC, and you're burning energy. So that's a short-term motivated action that comes at a price down the road, which probably isn't taken into account at the time of decision making. More long-term focused societies, they will pause before making that decision. They will have made a decision a long time ago to decide, okay, what is feasible? What can I afford? What can we as a society afford going forward? How much fuel do we want to burn for this? Okay, if we want to manage our climate better, or if we want to be more mindful of our energy consumption, that means our temperature will have to fall into this and that range. That means these extravagant, ad hoc, impromptu desires, I need to keep them in check, or we as a group need to keep them in check. And there's also a collectivist approach coming along with us, right? So I think cultural dimensions and comparison frameworks can explain part of that different climate control on different parts of the globe, right?
Yeah, we talk about personal space too. Think about cultures that are quite comfortable working in close proximity with each other. That can, even if it's not the tangible physical application of it, whether the body heat does that or not, but it is the feeling that a lot more people in a tighter space seems to create some kind of sensory warmth. But other cultures where there's a distance, where there's kind of more of a distance between where people work, they're separated. So therefore that, the larger degree of, or the control of the temperature influences their space, as big as they can make it. And they don't need the physical or sensory closeness of other people around them to operate. And it becomes, that becomes more of a kind of a, it's a higher level peripheral kind of vision type of thing, even when you're kind of working on a computer, for sure. Yeah.
And something that I noticed even here within the United States, and this I had similar observations in other parts of the world, it really depends on whether you're in an urban setting or a more country or suburban rural setting, how much space you occupy as an individual, or how much space you're comfortable occupying. And it struck me, or it hit me like a ton of bricks last time I was in Manhattan and in Brooklyn. And I live in the US South, where we have quite a lot of space to grow wide, even in a city like Atlanta, where I live. Yes, we have a few high-rise buildings, but Atlanta stretches far and wide. In cities like New York or in Chicago or in Boston, they don't have that kind of space. They build up, or they're closer together, though, so it's more compact. The population density is intensified compared to other urban settings in North America. And I recognized how I was closer to people in a way that I didn't mind. It just stood out to me. Oh, the people are closer to me in the subway, here in the coffee shop, or here in the restaurant, and we're maneuvering alongside of each other. It's busy. This was pre-COVID, by the way, and we're people who stood and sat and worked and navigated space in more proximity than I was used to in other parts of the United States. And my daughter had the same observation. She was like, Dad, this is really this is tighter here, isn't it? It's almost reminds me of Germany, she said. I said, yeah, in a way it does. And I think the space that people feel comfortable occupying changes or is affected by your surroundings. Because if you live in the Great Plains of the United States, in the wide open space of, I don't know, Texas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, it is perfectly okay for you to drive a pickup truck with, well, I don't even know the technical term, with a double wheels on the back, right? And it's
the Julies they call them, yeah.
Right, the F-450
F-150,
trucks or
yeah,
whatever,
yeah.
because you have that space and you're not entering anyone else's space by doing so.
Mm.
Not talking about energy bottom line, this is still questionable, but still you're not taking away space from somebody. You do the
Right.
same thing in a space like Manhattan, and people will cuss at you and they will let you know that you're occupying too much, that you're taking more than is your fair share. So space and temperature, they beget each other. I found that interesting, how people's environment, how their peripheral culture, so to say, affects that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. Now we had in Australia, we have a low population in a country that is ostensibly the same size as the continental US. But instead of 320 or 30 million, we only have 24 million, So even
they all live in Sydney, right?
Well, yeah, my hometown of Sydney, which really has a population in terms of the city centre, the population is on a par with maybe Chicago, where I live now. There's about almost 5 million people in that city. Well, think about that. That's almost, well, it's not quite, it used to be kind of a quarter of the population, but even it's under a quarter of the population in one city. And the next is Melbourne, and there's probably 4 million people there. So pretty much we're getting up to around about, just under half of the population in two major cities, because obviously the rest of the country, everything's trying to kill you. So nobody really wants to go out there too much. But even in those settings, the sense of having to cool down something in the middle of summer or heat it up in the middle of it when it got a little bit cooler, we don't deal with the extremes in temperature there, really wasn't something that people thought about a lot. We just, and maybe even, I'm thinking about sport, as you're talking about before, with cricket, where you can play a game that goes for 5 days and 6 hours a day, you're out in the most extreme heat that you've probably ever experienced, Now, for me, that's not unusual. That's a comfortable thing for me. But again, I play cricket here in Chicago with a lot of my teammates are from the UK. And I enjoy the really, really hot, humid days. They're dying because cricket in England is, you're supposed to drink tea. I'm not, supposed to be able to drink tea. So you want something a little cooler, maybe with a few clouds, a bit of cover and that kind of stuff. In Australia, it's like playing in the middle of the desert. So there is a cultural difference on what we're comfortable with in playing. So that you could then, if we take that, extrapolate out to, that might influence the performance of the team. That's real home team advantage, right?
Yeah.
Really extreme heat. We have the same, but then Australians would go to India, right? We love hot weather, but then you go to India and play there, and it's on up. Then they just step it up. It gets up, really high.
Is that why the Indians will kick both of the Brits and the Aussies' butts in cricket? Is that why?
Well, especially when they're playing at home, they do. Yeah, they do. But, not right now because they're playing in Australia, so they're under our conditions.
Talking about home advantage. So I notice in my family, there are diverging ideas of which temperature is the right one for the home. Right. I'm not sure if that happens to you or to our audience here, but I'm comfortable at a lower temperature than my wife is, and then we have our youngest daughter who would like to take it she would like to take it down by 10 degrees Fahrenheit from whatever anyone else in the house is saying. So she likes it really chill. What's it like for you?
Yeah, well, I think we have the same discussions. It's pretty much. But then okay, so think about this, and I don't know whether this is an application. There's a lot of studies in the dynamics of business. So if you have people that come from outside, and I noticed this when I went to China, the first few times I noticed it. When you went to visit a factory or something, there was no real air conditioning. I mean, we went to an office and we sat there and we were doing negotiations. We're talking about projects. Is there an advantage? Now, not to take advantage. We're not talking about taking advantage, but is there a sense that home field advantage and your control of the temperature may influence the way that you can either make it comfortable or uncomfortable for your counterparts, depending on what your goals are, right? I don't know whether there's probably obviously people who've done that in the past, but that's an interesting question, just like your daughter, if you wanted to,
Well, and I think it comes down to how much am I as an individual experiencing this climate, how much am I holding on to the expectation of what is comfortable for me, how much flexibility can I display and actually live in that environment? When I first moved to the southern United States, the first 2 summers were brutal for me. I will admit it. The humidity and the heat, I had difficulties adjusting. Now I take it in stride, so that is an adjustment process. However, it also taught me a little bit of humility around how much temperature can I handle, or how much cold can I handle. I've lived in Minnesota with 40 below, and I've lived in the South with 100, right? So I've seen that, or experienced a little bit of a bandwidth in terms of climate. Not that I would say this is what Earth has to offer, but it's quite a wide range. And the more flexible we can be, the easier it will be for us to find comfort. But then again, I'm reminded of the great late Karl Lagerfeld, the German fashion designer, haute couture designer, who said, comfort is totally overrated.
Right. Is that because he just wanted you got to look good first? Is that?
Of course, yeah. He said, if you leave the house in sweatpants, you have lost control over your life. His words.
I tend to agree with that.
So I like the term sweatpants, by the way, because they suggest that you sweat in them.
Which is not always the case.
So
active wear while you're sitting and drinking a coffee in Starbucks. This is
active wear. That's what it's called. Active fashion, I believe. No, active couture. So let us know, what temperature setting do you feel comfortable with, or what bandwidth of temperatures or humidity levels can you endure? Or is it just like Brett said in the beginning, there is no bad weather, there is only inappropriate clothing, something that my German parents would have told me, and something that my wife, who ran a Montessori school for many, many years, has here in the US told the parents of the kids who were sent to the school. There were parents who said, are you really going to let my kid out in that kind of weather? And that kind of weather could have been 100 degrees Fahrenheit, or it could have been rainy 32, right? Or 33. And she said, yes, we're going to go outside no matter what, because that's part of the day for the kids. Playtime in the open, that's part of a Montessori setting. Yeah, but how can you? Well, and she would tell them, there is no bad weather. You need to put the appropriate clothes on to your kid in the morning. Check your weather app, look outside, go to the closet, find what's best for the nature, for whatever temperature, climate, nature is determining for you for that day.
Absolutely. No, that's a good idea. I agree with that. In the old days, when we walked both ways uphill in 6 foot of snow, not in my country.
Did you? Okay, not sure. I did.
You did. You might have. I didn't.
And this whole idea of looking outside and responding to the weather that will be taken to a new level once you go to Texas, where I was told, if you don't like the weather in Texas, just wait 15 minutes.
Absolutely. Yes, that is the case. Right. We have that in Chicago too, by the way.
Which is almost Texas, I hear.
Close enough.
No,
same place.
Nah.
Really. Just all the same.
All right, so let us know what temperature your thermostat is set on, or if you even have a thermostat, or if you air condition your rooms, or if you just open the windows.
Put a fan on.
Or put a fan on. By the way, this window opening, one more thing before we let you go into your weekend, your well-deserved weekend. In Germany, there is a concept or a word that foreigners who come to Germany have to learn, or they respond to it in a funny way. It's called Zugluft, which literally translates into draft air or air draft.
Yeah.
Which is the natural air conditioning in most of Europe, because you open a window on this side of the house and another window on the other side of the house, and guess what? There will be some level of circulation. Mind you, though, in your office, as you still go to offices and maybe share an office space with another desk or a couple of desks in the same room, mind you, there might be one of your coworkers who will be very sensitive to too much air draft, because it might hit them right there in the nether neck regions, and it's a medical condition. I'm very sensitive to air draft, so would you please close the window? You have no idea how many arguments I've had over open or slightly tilted windows in Germany, how much that is appropriate or not appropriate, no matter what season of the year. So climate control, not only a matter of culture, also a matter of personality to a certain degree.
Absolutely. We're all different, and that's what makes the world a wonderful place.
Man, this was great. This was the closing line. Can we have an insert on the bottom? No. Okay.
Yeah, well, let me type that.
All right, Two Chaps, Many Cultures on this Friday, episode 110. Leave us a comment. Recommend us to your network. Share the link. Spread the love. Let us know what we want to talk about next. Suggest a guest. Maybe it's you. We'll never know. And we'll see you again, fresh and clean and crisp and warm at the very right temperature on Monday.
Thank you. See you guys.